With the rise to power of the Nazi Party, the NSDAP, in 1933, its leader Adolf Hitler set Germany on a path of revenge after the defeat in the First World War. Within just a few years, the country rose from the ashes, and by 1936, it was triumphantly hosting the Olympic Games. The Third Reich is often regarded as the very model of a totalitarian dictatorship, functioning efficiently through the synergy of its leadership, and collapsing only due to exhaustion and war. In this episode, however, we will at the very least challenge that perception. We will explore Hitler's style of governance, the semi-independent principalities of the most influential Nazis, the so-called Führer principle, the choice of guns over butter, and the deep internal struggles within what appeared to be the mighty and unified Third Reich. In the summer of 1934, Hitler ordered a wave of purges against powerful rivals inside the NSDAP. This campaign became known as the Night of the Long Knives. Among the victims were former Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher, the head of the party's paramilitary wing, Ernst Röhm, one of its chief ideologues, Gregor Strasser, and many others. By the lowest estimates, at least 85 people were killed. When German President Paul von Hindenburg lay on his deathbed, Hitler convened the government. It passed a law creating the office of the Supreme Leader of the German Reich, merging the roles of President and Chancellor under the new title Führer and Reich Chancellor. Of course, we know who assumed that position. From then on, the so-called Führer principle became firmly entrenched in the structure of the state. Hitler had first declared it the guiding rule of the Nazi Party, later describing it in detail as the blueprint for Germany's future. After 1933, the Führer principle was elevated to the official doctrine of the Third Reich, placing Hitler's will at its very core. In practice, this meant the swift execution of orders and a rigid chain of command. The will of the leadership was not to be questioned. The nation functioned like a pyramid, with every official unconditionally obeying their superior, and in turn demanding total submission from those below. Above all of this loomed the slogan, "The Führer is always right." A new approach took hold, working in the spirit of the Führer, meaning that orders were carried out without questions, without hesitation, and without the right to criticize. A striking example is the story of Adolf Eichmann, an SS official. Though he was not a fanatical Nazi, this quiet bureaucrat and father of three oversaw the destruction of millions of lives, including those of Europe's Jews. At his trial in 1961, Eichmann defended himself by claiming that he was merely doing his job. Hitler positioned himself as both the ultimate arbiter and the charismatic center of power. His true weapon was not decision-making, but propaganda. He showed little interest in details. Once in control, Hitler began integrating the Nazi Party into the state apparatus, building parallel structures and deliberately fostering competition. The clearest example of this was the police. Its functions overlapped with both the Ministry of the Interior and the SS security units. When Hitler abolished the autonomy of Germany's federal states, he also stripped them of control over the police. Within the ministry, he created a police department under the leadership of SS officer Kurt Daluege. Officially, the police remained part of the state, but in practice, they answered to the SS. Soon, Heinrich Himmler became chief of the police. As head of the SS, he could bypass the minister altogether, and eventually he assumed that post himself. This dramatically increased the efficiency of repression and the elimination of opposition. At the time Hitler came to power, the SS numbered only about 50,000 members. But its influence grew rapidly thanks to its expanding control over the concentration camp system. The SS grew into a state within a state. They operated their own enterprises, enjoyed financial independence, and commanded their own armed forces, challenging the Wehrmacht's monopoly on military power. By the end of the war, the Waffen-SS had expanded into 38 divisions, numbering over 800,000 men. Wehrmacht generals tried to limit the SS in both recruits and equipment, criticizing their poor leadership and heavy losses. For example, in the Totenkopf division on the Eastern Front in 1941-42, SS commanders accused the army of deliberately delaying supplies and obstructing their operations. One notable dispute erupted in 1943 when Waffen-SS Corps commander Paul Hauser clashed with Wehrmacht generals over offensive tactics near Kharkov. Yet, whenever a clear order came from the top, rivalry often drove the staffs to act faster, each trying to prove themselves first in Hitler's eyes. At the height of the Reich's expansion, Heinrich Himmler concentrated an extraordinary amount of power in his hands. He was Reichsführer SS, chief of the German police, imperial commissioner for the consolidation of the German nation, and held the high party rank of Reichsleiter. By the war's end, however, Himmler overplayed his hand, attempting to bypass Hitler and negotiate directly with the Americans. The coup failed. Himmler was arrested by a Soviet patrol, and the SS leader took his own life. He was not the only one to build his own fiefdom within the Reich. Other top Nazis did the same, among them Joseph Goebbels, Martin Bormann, Alfred Rosenberg, Albert Speer, and Hermann Göring. In 1936, Hitler entrusted Göring with leading the four-year plan aimed at preparing Germany's economy and military for war. At the head of the program, Hitler placed not the skilled banker Hjalmar Schacht, head of the Reichsbank, but the loyal, though inexperienced, Hermann Göring. Schacht, an able specialist, clearly saw that an economy run by amateurs was doomed to fail. Göring, however, had always known how to agree with Hitler at just the right moment. His standing grew stronger thanks to the Luftwaffe's early successes in 1939-40, but the war against the Soviet Union soon revealed the weaknesses of his leadership. Hitler deliberately burdened Göring with tasks outside his direct military duties, ensuring that the ambitious Marshal would not become a dangerous political rival. The natural outcome was that, overwhelmed by his many roles, Göring failed to perform effectively in any of them. By 1942, control of the war economy had passed to Albert Speer, and Goering's influence rapidly declined. To explore the deeper currents of history and share these stories with you, our team relies on your support. We truly value your likes, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Meanwhile, Reich's Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, placed art, the press, and cinema firmly in the service of dictatorship. He organized Nazi political campaigns, initiated the burning of books deemed contrary to National Socialist ideology, and called for boycotts of Jewish businesses. He enlisted filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl to glorify the Reich and its Führer. Through Goebbels' centralized propaganda machine, messages spread seamlessly across newspapers, radio, and film. This system proved highly effective in promoting everything from military recruitment to fundraising drives and labor campaigns. In February 1943, after the disaster at Stalingrad, Goebbels called for total war and maximum mobilization. Even in the face of certain defeat, he remained utterly devoted to Hitler. This loyalty explains why, in the final days of the war, Goebbels was appointed Reich Chancellor. Yet he held the post for only a single day, before, like Hitler, taking his own life. Martin Bormann, by contrast, was neither a battlefield hero nor a gifted orator. His strength lay in bureaucracy. He first aligned himself with Hitler's deputy, Rudolf Hess, and later with Hitler himself. At first, Bormann handled routine administrative tasks, but he eventually rose to more important roles, such as organizing party rallies and overseeing the construction of the Berghof residence. As Hitler's personal secretary, Bormann understood his leader's taste for intrigue and skillfully fueled it. By controlling access to Hitler, he forced other Nazi officials to reckon with his influence. Hitler, for his part, deliberately avoided assigning clear responsibilities among his ministries. Rivalry kept his subordinates guessing at his wishes. Rather than resolving conflicts, Hitler encouraged them. A believer in the theory of natural selection, he deliberately fostered competition, convinced that the strongest would prevail. Another hallmark of his leadership was his preference for oral orders, avoiding written instructions. This practice shifted responsibility onto subordinates, blurred standards of accountability, and pushed officials to act ever more broadly, boldly, and radically, often in an attempt to anticipate the Führer's will. The greatest chaos reigned in the regime's Jewish policy. Deportations, the stripping of rights, and mass killings were overseen not by a single authority, but by competing institutions, the Reich Main Security Office, the Foreign Ministry, and the local Gauleiters. There was no single center of control, yet it was precisely this competition that made the genocide even more extensive. Military logistics, too, were riddled with disorder. Disputes constantly arose over the distribution of resources between the Wehrmacht, the SS, and industry. Only when a direct order came from Hitler would engineering and construction units concentrate their efforts on specific roads, fortifications, or airfields, often at the expense of other urgent needs. Ideology consistently outweighed rational analysis. Decisions were often shaped by racial theories and political slogans. A symbol of this mindset was the infamous phrase, "guns instead of butter." In the mid-1930s, food shortages, particularly of butter, sparked public discontent. Responding to this, Hermann Goering told a gathering of Nazi activists, "Guns make us strong, while butter only makes people fat." The slogan was eagerly adopted by other Nazi leaders. Yet allocating resources in such a way meant that by the time Germany launched its invasion of the Soviet Union, Hjalmar Schacht had already predicted defeat due to the country's economic weaknesses. In foreign policy, decisions rested in the hands of a narrow circle. Until 1938, the key figure was Foreign Minister Konstantin von Neurath, later replaced by Joachim von Ribbentrop. Their course of action could change swiftly, with decisions implemented at lightning speed. Germany's withdrawal from the League of Nations and the Disarmament Conference, the Anschluss of Austria, and the Munich Agreement over the Sudetenland. Goebbels' propaganda machine wasted no time in presenting these moves as triumphs. Berlin relied heavily on bilateral treaties, mixing threats with promises. The non-aggression pact with Poland removed the immediate threat of war in the East and gave Germany time to rearm. The Anglo-German naval agreement effectively nullified the restrictions of the Versailles Treaty, as Britain accepted the rebuilding of Germany's fleet. And the Anti-Comintern Pact with Japan, later joined by Italy, created an anti-Soviet bloc. Each of these agreements divided potential opponents, bought Germany more time, and laid the groundwork for the next act of aggression.
Before the annexation of Austria and the Sudetenland, German intelligence services staged incidents of alleged persecution of ethnic Germans. Goebbels then presented these as proof of the need for intervention. In August 1939, a provocation near Gleiwitz was carried out to justify the invasion of Poland. This so-called fait accompli tactic allowed Germany to cement new realities without lengthy negotiations. But this seemingly effective foreign policy collapsed between 1942 and 1943. After defeats at El Alamein in North Africa and at Stalingrad, the aura of Wehrmacht invincibility was shattered. Germany's allies began to doubt the value of cooperation. Italy capitulated in 1943, and soon after, Romania, Bulgaria, and Finland switched sides. Mounting economic problems weakened the Reich's influence, while terror in the occupied territories alienated potential partners in Eastern Europe. Hitler's governing methods had worked for the first 8 years, but they could not withstand the ultimate test of total war. Still, one question remains. Were all aspects of the Nazi system truly ineffective? Share your thoughts in the comments.